really into this, are you?
Welcome back to Wish for Death Island Population Me. Today, I've got something special for you. This is a book that's reputation precedes itself, and while it was very popular, it is generally maligned by, well, anyone that can read. For those of you who've seen my Harry Potter reviews, you might be thinking, wow, this video is a bit short for a book review, why is it so short? This video is on the first 2 chapters of Twilight, not the entire book. I'm not kidding with the title, I'm serious. This series is so bad that I cannot take more than 2 chapters each time, and I already have around 80 quotes for these chapters, so buckle up, buckaroos. And don't worry, the Harry Potter reviews are probably gonna get longer too. Some of that shit is just crazy. Also, a good friend of mine has been streaming recently, and I just really enjoy hanging out during the streams. They're a lot of fun, so I wanted to shout it out here quickly because I think it's really cool, and I would like it if some of you came to hang out there too. I'm pretty much always in the chat for them, and I'm always spamming Bob Ross emotes, so if you have some time and your internet can handle it and you just kind of want to chill out, I'd really appreciate it if you just came to hang out with us. Okay, let's get started before my brain commits seppuku. Oh, speaking of seppuku, I haven't forgotten 13 Reasons Why. Don't worry, season 2 review is coming and it's worse than season 1. Ugh, I've distracted myself long enough. Okay, yes, I know what everyone's going to say. Sparkling vampires are fucking stupid. We know this. I know this. Every single time someone makes a joke about the series, it's about the stupid sparkle. It's been done to death. Let's get this out of our systems. You can say, her, vampire sparkle faggot, got him, and just leave it at that. Honestly, true, but I want to focus on the details. As many as I can, if not all the details, to the point where we've come to where we are today with the quotes. As for the movie, as bad as it looks, it's better than the book. I mean, it's not good, but it's comparatively better. Although I must say I do not recall Edward looking like Shrek with syphilis, and the bold decision to have the lead character have AIDS indeed broke new ground, but that's what I expect from Rian Johnson.
That's right. I have AIDS.
This book starts with a short excerpt before the actual story, and even then, it's bad. Bella, our best girl ever that totally has a personality, is lying on the floor and about to get yeeted by a vampire. She kind of seems bothered, but honestly, she's more into the fact that she's gonna look selfless for this instead of like being afraid of being attacked like a normal person would be. Noble, she says, even that ought to count for something. Bella needs everyone to know that she is needlessly sacrificial and willing to die for looking good on any occasion, because looking selfless is better than being smart and pragmatic. This is my first major issue with her. She barely has any personality, and when she does show some initiative, there's always this dot point kind of vibe to it, like she just does it for the sake of the story and not actually for any reasoning of her own. It's like Maya got really lazy and was like, I don't need to put any effort into working up to this thing happening for it to make sense in the story. Let's just make it happen anyway and let Bella tell us what she's doing. So she states that she's being selfless, and it just comes across as like she's full of herself. She even goes on to say, when life offers you a dream so far beyond any of your expectations, it's not reasonable to grieve when it comes to an end. Flaccid vampire cock is just that good, guys. On to chapter 1. The actual chapter begins with her describing her shirt and saying she's wearing it as her final send-off before she goes on the plane. Then she says, my carry-on item was a parka. As bland as this writing style is, I actually like this one phrase because it indicates that she'll cover up her shirt when everyone she cares about can't see it anymore. It's a small bit of characterization in a labyrinth of garbage, and this is something Maya does now, but basically never again. For the entirety of the book, she forgets how to do this and just decides to explain every single thing, to the point where a character might say something with their dialogue, and directly afterwards Bella will be like, they said this, and it's like, yeah, I just read it, I was there. She thinks her audience is retarded, and to be fair, anyone who unironically likes this book basically is. She describes the town she's moving to, Forks, and says that she doesn't like it, and the fact that she's moving back there because her parents split up when she was a kid, her mom and her moved away to Phoenix, and then she decides to move back with her dad because she feels like she's a burden on her mom having fun and wants to be selfless and do something about it because it's all about Bella. If you didn't catch that, that, don't worry, she'll keep repeating it for the entire book. It is from this town and its gloomy, omnipresent shade that my mother escaped with me when I was only a few months old. This town is repeated so many times, it's just, this sentence doesn't help it. This first chapter as well, she's trying so hard to be poetic, but it just comes out really try-hard and nonsensical, and then afterwards you can tell that she gives up because she just immediately goes into dot points. Like the way she describes her mom here, Jesus Christ. How could I leave my loving, erratic, harebrained mother to fend for herself? Wow, Bella. Bella, you're so selfless. Her mom asks her if she'll be okay and she lies and says yes, but the idea of this is not presented well because she just over-explains what's going on and comes back to the idea that she's depressed so many times I don't have any sympathy for her. I've always been a bad liar. You know, you could have showed that at some point, but you just decided to tell us, so why should I be invested in anything that you do? Her mom is like, I'll come visit, but Bella can tell that even visiting, her mom is shouldering the burden that is Bella, and she cannot let that stand. She says, I could see the sacrifice behind her eyes in the promise. Oh God, make it stop. This already sets her up to be super egotistical, but no, she is the perfect girl. She is gonna get that flaccid vampire dick. Believe you me. Flying doesn't bother me. The hour in the car with Charlie, though, was what I was worried about. Charlie's dead, by the way. There's another way you could explain this. There's a million other ways that you could explain this besides what you did. Describing how the plane ride might seem long and turbulent, but it would be nothing but a blink compared to how long the gaps of silence between you and your dad could be. I mean, something like that off the top of my head. Just anything besides what you did. And afterwards she says it again. But it was sure to be awkward with Charlie. You've established this. Oh, what's this? More of the same thing you just said when you get away from the airport and you're in his car? Neither of us was what anyone would call verbose, and I didn't know what there was to say regardless. And yet you're still talking. So she explains his occupation. Charlie is police chief sworn to the good people of Forks. Again, the way that she puts this information in is just like she's describing it to herself in the notes that you make before you start writing your first draft. I know this seems like I'm making a big deal out of this one sentence, but the tiny things really make a big deal when you just keep being slack with them, you know what I mean? Neaten up the sentence a little more and be like, Charlie was waiting in his police cruiser with his gear on, and say how long he's been in service or something. You can just put it in a lot more elegant kind of way. She also says that she doesn't want to ride in a car with him to go places because she feels like the cop car is a beacon that draws attention. Of course, she doesn't say it like that. As cliche as that is, that would be some sort of effort. Instead, she says, nothing slows down traffic like a cop, and then describes directly how she doesn't want to be in a cop car. You could even just describe her glancing around and sheepishly getting into the car because she's just kind of nervous about drawing attention to herself. And even then it could kind of loop back around to when Edward eventually pays attention to her because she doesn't like how he stares at her or something at first, and she outwardly avoids him. And it's not that she becomes obsessed with him, but it's just that she doesn't like seeing his stare because it kind of gives her an anxiety attack or something because she's that kind of person. But instead, that's not what happens. Her dad is also a fucking NPC. He has this really weird conversation with her. It's like Oblivion dialogue. Part of the robot thing is kind of intentional, I guess, because they're both really awkward, but I feel like it stops being intentional and starts just being her not knowing how to write dialogue with any character in it at all. It's like The Sims talking. She says he's gonna get her a good car, and not just a good car in general, but she says good car for her because she gets caught up on him saying that. And instead of using the dialogue to establish this, she directly states this. The way he said good car for you and not just good car. Yes, Bella, I was there. I know he said that. You don't have to repeat it. And then this happens again. La Push is the tiny Indian reservation on the coast. This is another one of those bland sentences that I just think affect the novel. For example, if you just rearranged it a bit, you could say something like, he said, referring to the nondescript Indian reservation on the coast or something. But no, minimal effort is too much effort. Explains that she has trouble with the old car because she doesn't know how to maintain it. All of this happens just right away instead of any other sort of stuff going on in between. She isn't thinking about the town or anything. She just every now and again has a dot point and then goes right back to the NPC conversation. And I don't mind conversations stretching on for a long time as long as they're interesting, but this one just made me so bored. Dad, I don't really know anything about cars. I wouldn't be able to fix it if anything went wrong, and I can't afford a mechanic. He shows that the car's already been bought, and she's like, you don't need to do that, Dad. I was going to buy myself a car. Pearl Harbor could happen in front of her, and then she'd just stand there and be like, wow, that's kind of cool. And then she wouldn't have any emotions. What's this piece of information I've never seen before? Charlie wasn't comfortable expressing his emotions out loud. Wow, never seen that before in my life. She goes on about her day, and Charlie thinks that he can do some things to try and make his daughter happy because he's putting in effort for his family, but she's so pretentious that the mighty Bella cannot be happy with his best efforts because she's Bella, and she needs to tell everyone this every single time. No need to add that my being happy in Forks is an impossibility. Yeah, you're right, you didn't need to add that, but you did anyway. So he's awkward again, and then he gets thanked or has to speak to people, and he gets even more awkward and looks away. Like, he gets embarrassed by her thanks, and then she has to point it out every single time this happened. We exchanged a few more comments on the weather, which was wet, and that was pretty much it for the conversation. This sentence is an abortion. There, parked on the street in front of the house that never changed, was my new to me, truck. You didn't need to say this, please. With the minimal effort thing, like, I don't show a lot of my writing because I feel like my writing's not good enough, and I'm kind of getting up to that point, but what I did in this video was kind of new to me because I started to rewrite some of the Twilight sentences, but I actually did try to rewrite this one as, again, off the top of my head. I just kind of sat down and wrote out the first thing that came to my mind, just to show that even a little bit of effort, it's not good, it's not great, but it's something. It actually feels like a book, at least, I think. My version is: the house that never changed, a purgatory of childhood vignettes, and there, parked in front of it, was the lopsided, aged truck, the only reminder that time could move at all in the streets of stagnation and regret. How did I do? Was that a little better? So Bella goes on to say, now my horrific day tomorrow would be just that much less dreadful. I wouldn't be faced with the choice of either walking 2 miles in the rain to school or accepting a ride in the Chief's cruiser. Are you trying to pad out the word count? Are you like me when I had to write essays at like 2 in the morning? It's not like you've mentioned this before. And of course she thanks Charlie, her dad, for the car, and she repeats the information about how he's embarrassed again. A way to change this would be, like, she's mentioned before that he likes to look away from people when he's talking because he gets embarrassed by compliments and whatnot, so why don't you just have that shown in what he does when he talks? Like, Dad, you really are amazing for getting me that car, I said, and then he's like, thanks, he said to his shoes as we trudged up the driveway, or something, just something. So she's doing her own thing, and then Charlie just leaves her alone because it's awkward, and then guess what? Piece of information we get about Charlie again. One of the best things about Charlie is that he doesn't hover. Bella decides that she has nothing else to do but just sit around moping because her life is so fucking awful. Thing is, I can relate to it in theory because I've had to move around a lot in my childhood to the point that child me gave up on making friends at all. I would kind of just sit and read, and I didn't want to talk to people because I was like, I'm just gonna move again and I won't see them again, so what's the point? And I got really depressed and kind of tried to bottle it up from my family because I didn't want to put stress on them in a tough time. So I really do understand how she feels, but the way that she's going on about it, I just don't have any sympathy. Any sort of connection that I might have had to the main character is taken away because of how little effort was put in and how unlikable she seems. A relief to stare dejectedly out the window at the sheeting rain let just a few tears escape. This moping gets so bad that I honestly wanted to put the book down. I would be the new girl from a big city, a curiosity, a freak. And then she continues doing this as if she's distancing herself from people because she's so noble, but also the edgy kid who thinks that their life is pain and they're amazing and no one can understand them, and harming both myself and anyone else who stood too close. And then she starts talking about how she's totally not attractive or special at all, even though all of the guys in school like her. Oh, speaking of, time for a really bad description. My skin could be pretty. It was very clear, almost translucent looking, and it all depended on color. I had no color here. Fuck's sake. And it wasn't just physically that I'd never fit in. You say that. I didn't relate well to people my age.
Ooh, we have a special snowflake!
It's like somebody took human emotions and then just ran them through AI writing tools that just makes it look like a 14-year-old wrote it. She does this for like half the chapter and then finally moves on to the next day. I didn't sleep well that night, even when I was done crying. Oh my god, I don't care. So she wakes up again and talks about how she doesn't like the town. She said that she can feel the claustrophobia creeping up on her. You can never see the sky here. It was like a cage. Just close the window if it makes you feel depressed. She also finds out that Charlie kept her room almost the same since she was a kid, and she realizes how much he tried to stay in the happy times when they were all together, so it's like a time capsule. But of course, she says this all with the worst writing I've ever seen. It was impossible, being in this house, not to realize that Charlie had never gotten over my room. It made me uncomfortable, which had the feel of a biohazard. Please stop saying words like feel and just stating what you want to say. Chuck Palahniuk is crying right now. And also, the day is wet, but the truck isn't. Inside the truck, it was nice and dry. I'm gonna have an aneurysm. Finding the school wasn't difficult, although I'd never been there before. We know you've never been there before. You went on not being to the school before for entire pages about how you've never been to the town in a really long time. We know this. You don't have to explain that you've never been to the high school before when you're just transferred into the high school. She goes on to say, where was the feel of the institution? I wondered nostalgically. Where are the chain link fences, the metal detectors? Okay, this is the abortion of a sentence. Like, she's such a bland character that this one attempt at sarcasm is just so ill-fitting with the rest of the story tonally that I just genuinely, it looks like she's going insane. No one else was parked there, so I was sure it was off limits, but I decided I would get directions inside, instead of circling around in the rain like an idiot. Once again, I tried to rewrite the sentence myself instead of explaining why it was bad for the millionth time. Here's mine. Finding the school wasn't difficult. In a matter of minutes, I was pulling into an empty parking lot in front of reception. I don't want to say that it was out of bounds because I feel like you don't need to include that, but if I had to, I'd say it appeared to be out of bounds, but I was shielded from reprimand by the ignorance of a new student, so I ducked my head against the unfriendly weather and rushed inside, or something like that. I don't know. I don't like the sentence that I wrote, but I feel like it's a bit of a step up, you know? Like, I'd change basically everything about it, but I feel like it's still better than the one that she wrote. So the receptionist looks at her because her name is known around here since everyone knows about the divorce, and it's uncomfortable for her, but she feels the need to explain the situation every single sentence, so my sympathy is rapidly draining. I was expected, a topic of gossip no doubt, daughter of the chief's flighty ex-wife, come home at last. I feel like you could say that they split up, but then reveal more about the relationship and why they split up over time. It just feels like one of those complex things that was just shat out immediately instead of unfolded over the course of the book. So Bella says that she smiled as convincingly as she could because she's just putting in so much effort to be here. She even says that she's going to be okay. I'm gonna be okay, but I'm lying to myself because I'm not okay. Please, Bella, I wish that isekai truck just killed you. So she gets out of the truck and complains about herself more. My plain black jacket didn't stand out, I noticed with relief. She's so plain and she doesn't stand out, yet the vampire notices her, and then immediately two of the human boys want to fuck her as soon as she gets to school. She goes through the motions of her being stupid in every class because the new people are scary and all this crap, and then she finds out that they're already doing the books that she has read for English and gets super snobby. This was comforting and boring. I wondered if my mom would send me folders of my essays, or if she would think that would be cheating. Oh god, of course, because you like literature. She's one of those young adult characters who like specific classics, and there's nothing wrong with liking the cliche classics that everyone always brings up. If that's what you like, that's what you like. But what I mean is that these are the most accessible books for people who don't actually like reading but want to pretend that they do for the aesthetic, you know what I mean? Like, she can just pick up Wuthering Heights or Shakespeare, Goodreads quotes, like the most popular quotes, or a Spark Notes thing, or like something from one of those like clickbait best quotes ever type of articles, and then just put them into the book and then claim that her character likes reading. It's kind of like if a character liked doing a particular sport but you don't play that sport in real life, so instead of trying to research it, you just put in the most cliche things possible that you think you know about it. And I feel like people do the character that likes reading but they don't research a character that likes reading would be like type of cliche a lot more because it's easier to do, it's easier to fake, and I feel like Bella is like the prime example of one of those fake, I know I love reading type of people. Like, she likes Wuthering Heights, and I own that book too, but she acts so generic about it, it's like she hasn't read it. So she tries making a joke to a student and it fails, and once again we get some more stellar dialogue. She gets introduced to more people and repeats that she forgot their names as if we didn't hear her the first time. It was there, sitting in the lunchroom, trying to make conversation with 7 curious strangers, that I first saw them. Oh my god, there they are. Flaccid pee-pee gang. As if they were all suffering from a sleepless night and almost done recovering from a broken nose, is how she describes them, even though they're really beautiful, apparently. They sound insufferable. They were faces you'd never expect to see except perhaps on the airbrushed pages of a fashion magazine. Convenient, isn't it? And of course the most beautiful one of them is the one that becomes a stalker for Bella because he loves her. Actually, why do the vampires stay in high school forever? They have a big mansion and a big forest. They could just kind of run around there. And honestly, it would be way more interesting if those people were like, you hear about that one family that lives in the forest and they're like, they do a lot of good work, but you never see them. And then it's like, they have kids our age, but they don't go to school. Isn't that weird? Or something like that. And some people might think they're a cult or something. And it would have this like whole mystery around it, and then she would walk past Edward at one point in some other scenario other than school, and then he'd show up to like watch her around school because he's a fucking creep, or he'd like pick her up from school and everyone would be like, oh my god, you're fraternizing with that weird family. But instead they're just going to high school. Also, Edward is a really terrible person in this book. I think that doesn't need to be said, but I'm saying it anyway. He's creepy, obsessive. I mean, Bella is terrible, but she's terrible in like an annoying human kind of way. He's terrible in like a serial killer kind of way. The girl that she meets tells her about the vampires. Well, she doesn't know they're vampires, but whatever. And she doesn't like the dad person, so she makes this clear in her dialogue and actions, but Bella thinks that we're stupid, so she has to explain it. I guess so, Jessica admitted reluctantly, and I got the impression that she didn't like the doctor and his wife for some reason. And then she says that they just moved down 2 years ago from somewhere in Alaska, so I assume in Alaska they were also going to high school, and then they came here and then went to high school. And then Bella decides to give them some pity because she has enough to use on herself. Pity because, as beautiful as they were outsiders, clearly not accepted. Relief that I wasn't the only newcomer here, and certainly not the most interesting by any standard. So Edward then starts staring at her, and they haven't even spoken, but they already love each other. Then I glanced at him again. His face was turned away, but I thought his cheek appeared lifted, as if he was smiling too. When we entered the classroom, Angela went to sit at the blacktop lab table exactly like the ones I was used to. Oh god, the description. I guess what I do here is make the room sound familiar with the sterile environment and the blacktop tables, and the kind of universal lab layout of every science room, but also that it's kind of cold and empty, so it's not a good type of recognition to cling to, but you have nothing left. That would be, I guess, way more in line with someone who's missing their hometown. So Edward has to sit next to her in science class, and he keeps making this face like he has shit under his nose, and it bothers Bella, because she stinks. And she also already knows everything about the class because Bella is big brain. Unfortunately, the lecture was on cellular anatomy, something that I already studied. I took notes carefully, always looking down. She's also obsessed with Edward, even though they've known each other for like 5 seconds. Because I was waiting for his tight fist to loosen, it never did, and he continued to sit still so it looked like he wasn't breathing. After that, she rushes out and goes to sports ball. Here, PE was mandatory for all 5 years. Forks was literally personal hell on earth. So she goes home thinking of why Edward thought that she stunk. For an instant, I felt the thrill of genuine fear raising the hair on my arm. The look only lasted a second, but it chilled me more than the freezing wind. Just take a shower. Also, my personal favorite unnecessary word is just, also obviously and slightly, and they all make an appearance in this book, like just staring out the windshield. I mean, I'm not saying that just isn't always an unnecessary word, but I think that most of the time people just don't know how to use it. I headed back to Charlie's house, fighting tears the whole way there. This would impact me more if you hadn't been moping and crying the entirety of the chapter as well, but that is how we end the first chapter, and we've only been going for half an hour, but now it is time for chapter 2. Mike came to sit with me in English and walked me to my next class, with Chess Club Eric glaring at him all the while. It was flattering. So she goes on about how no one likes her, no one notices her, but as soon as we get to school now, those two follow you around like lost puppies because they love you. It honestly makes you look inauthentic. It's like you're in love with the idea of suffering, or like seeming like everyone needs to pity you, but at the same time you have it a lot easier than you're making it out. Bella bothers me because she wants to be wanted. She loves being loved. She'll get close to someone because she loves that feeling that they give her, but she doesn't want to reciprocate. But they think that they're in a relationship with her because she makes it out to be that way, and then she'll think that they're being selfish for not understanding that she just wants them to give her stuff. She has this kind of high opinion of herself, but she pretends that she doesn't, and honestly I see a lot of that from badly written female protagonists, because I hate it when it shows girl power as some sort of like I have to be mean to everyone type of thing. It just comes across as them being insecure, because if you have a really strong character they really don't care about any of this stuff. And I think that Bella isn't supposed to be strong at the start of this. Of course she's supposed to be kind of weak, and some of those bad emotions and bad thoughts are fine for a flawed character, but she has to get over them eventually. And the problem with Bella is that she doesn't get over them. The book is written with this assumption that she isn't doing anything wrong, when clearly she is a horrible person. And I see that a lot in really badly written female protagonists. Now, of course, suddenly getting compliments and attention when you're used to not getting them is very emotional and quite startling. In my experience, like I said, I've always been someone who kind of expects to just kind of go off into the side, and I never really expected to be noticed. And then when I make videos, I've had a lot of people say compliments, and I've just been really shocked and overwhelmed with the amount of them. So it is definitely something that makes you feel really emotional about it at first, but the problem is you need to process them and move on healthily. You need to not let them get to you. But I feel like some people do, and then you kind of end up in that kind of Twitch thought territory where they just kind of live off of the feeling of being wanted instead of actually processing it like an adult. I'm getting into some weird territory here, so I'm just going to continue on with the book, but you get what I mean. Despite the fact that they interacted very little and Edward seems to hate her, she's already obsessed with him in like the love interest way. Why? Because the book said so. He's a love interest instead of an actual character development. They just like each other immediately because that's the plot. It feels like there's nothing really there. In my personal account, romance is really hard for me to write because I don't really have any interest in reading it unless it's part of other things, and I personally never really got any personal experience with it because I just never wanted to, so I don't really have anything to go off of. And since my series that I'm working on is like a Twin Peaks Trevor Henderson inspired detective kind of thing, working on world building kind of took precedence. But one of the things that I do is I get all my characters and then kind of just put them in random scenarios and see how they work together to know them. And I didn't have a main character love interest planned, but it ended up happening because of those characters that worked well together. And I feel like that's a better way to approach it than just being like, they love each other now, don't ask me why, they just do. She also complains about going to school the next day, and it was worse because Edward Cullen wasn't at school at all. And then she says, but I knew myself too well to think I would really have the guts to do it. Then she goes to lunch and she says, I saw his 4 siblings of sorts were sitting together at the same table and he was not with them. She just said that he wasn't there, and then she repeats he wasn't there. She also says it's tough with boys fawning all over her already. It looked like I was going to have to do something about Mike, and it wouldn't be easy. I was relieved that I had the desk to myself, and that Edward was absent. But then you say that you want him to be there. Huh? So then she gets into her car at the end of the day and just, as I waited, trying to pretend that the ear-splitting rumble was coming from someone else's car, I saw 2 Cullens and the Hale twins getting into their car. Did she write this blindfolded? She loves repeating the same word in a single paragraph or sentence. Let me fix this. I waited, pretending as if the rumble was coming from someone else's car. 2 of the Cullens were getting into their Volvo with the Hale twins. Immediately a little better. Excessive for them to have both good looks and money. Yeah, it kinda does, but you did it anyway, didn't you? So Charlie doesn't cook or keep anything in the fridge, so she goes to do it and goes on about how being at the groceries makes her feel normal. It was nice to be inside the supermarket. It felt normal. I did the shopping at home, and I fell into the pattern of the familiar task gladly. Her mom also spams emails at her, so she has to respond when she gets home. And then she says, I decided to read Wuthering Heights, the novel we are currently studying in English, yet again for the fun of it, because she's a literature girl. Charlie gets home, and because he's not really used to people being in the house, he calls out just to check if she's home, you know, like how you do. And then she's like, who else? I thought to myself. Like, calm your tits, he's just checking to see if he's home. And then she talks about his gun, and she's like, I guess he considered me old enough now not to shoot myself by accident, and not depressed enough to shoot myself on purpose. Honestly, I kinda wish you did the second one. He seems to remember that his wife cooked food in a particular way, and he reacts to that with Bella because he's having those sort of memories, and we've already established that he basically kept his house like a time capsule because he misses his wife so much. But then she says, I was surprised and sad that he seemed to remember that far back, even though you've established that he clearly does. He seemed to feel awkward standing in the kitchen doing nothing. Yeah, it's almost like he said that before. Neither of us was bothered by the quiet. You don't say. He also likes the Cullens and seems offended by people not taking them seriously or liking the Doctor. And then he makes this big speech about them. As soon as he makes the big speech that he feels strongly about them, Bella is like, he must feel strongly about whatever people were saying. Wow, really? And then afterwards, she compliments them, and then she's like, I added, trying to be more complimentary. Also, I complain about J.K. Rowling with her use of parentheses all the time, but this bitch, she uses the same words over and over again, and she uses hyphens a lot. So for Rowling, she got me triggered by parentheses, but with this chick, I'm triggered by hyphens. I swear if this keeps going, couple years down the line, I'm just gonna be triggered by like old grammar, and I'm just gonna go live in the wilderness. So she comments on her routine. I could feel a tradition in the making, when she could just like tack that on with a comma and it would be way better. She also gets pissy that the vampire man isn't there the next day. Like, bitch, you saw him once, get over it. But I couldn't totally suppress the worry that I was responsible for his continued absence, ridiculous as it seems. Charlie is used to coping with living alone, so he's awkward. Never had that before, better repeat it again. I wondered idly what kind of gas mileage the truck got, and shuddered at the thought. She also reminds us that she doesn't know the names of the people that she was introduced to. In English, Mike took his accustomed seat by my side. We had a pop quiz on Wuthering Heights. It was straightforward and very easy. Edward is back at lunch and Bella gets embarrassed. Mike then asks what the fuck is up and she rambles in her head some more. So many boys, so little time. Which boy do you like? The werewolf? The vampire? The human? Concern, how I was feeling. I told him it was nothing, but I was wondering if I should play it up and escape to the nurse's office for the next hour, just because a boy told you that you smell. And then she gives another hyphen. The other girl likes Mike, something I do not care about. The way she looked at Mike left little doubt that she would be up for anything that he suggested. I kept silent. My stomach did frightened little flips at the thought of sitting next to him again. And then a friend gets killed by Snowball. She feels really stupid, and then she talks to Edward and isn't going on about how she stinks this time, so that's pretty good. But then, I don't know why he's so interested in her boring-ass life. Edward asked. I looked up to see him smiling a crooked smile so beautiful that I could only stare at him like an idiot. He touches her skin and then it gets all cold and he's like, oh no, and then he doesn't do it again. He's cold and you're stinky, go get married. I would have written this while he looked, but his clear, elegant script intimidated me and I didn't want to spoil the page with my clumsy scroll. Oh my god. He sounds insufferable. Today, his eyes were a completely different color, a strange ochre, darker than butterscotch, but with the same golden tone. So then she explains her mom's boyfriend, and Edward is just described as like everything he does is just exactly what she wants. It's like almost to the point where he's so perfect that it's set for him to be like the evil guy all along that was trying to suck her into a vampire cult or something, but it just turns out that he is just this way. He continued to stare at me with penetrating eyes, and as my dull life story was somehow vitally important. Because he's a stalker, and I laughed without humor. Hasn't anyone told you life isn't fair? But what is she, an escaped ISIS bride? You just moved to a different town, you didn't get your head lopped off. And then he sucks up to her because this is Harry Potter Ego 2.0. But I'd be willing to bet that you're suffering more than you let anyone else ever see. She just moved towns. She moved towns. She's not like an amputee. I was in disbelief that I just explained my dreary life to this bizarre, beautiful boy who may or may not despise me. We know. You don't like school, you like flaccid vamp dick, you like that you're smart people stuff, you hate this town, we know, get a hobby. I couldn't concentrate on Mike's chat as we walked to the gym, and PE didn't do much to hold my attention either. You said this like the past 3 days, we know that you don't like sports, we get it. But I was happier when I was in my dry cab. Rain makes sky go wet, but sky water no touch me when I under cover of mechanical horse could I go fast. Edward just fucking laughs at her because she sucks. Well, I guess there's a joke or something, but I like to think it's because she sucks. He's laughing now, but when you get hit by that isekai truck, he won't be laughing anymore. We've been going on for 40 minutes about this stupid book, and we're not even past the first 2 chapters, so I'm going to end it there before I go insane. I really need to just get a cup of tea and forget that I exist. I hope that you come hang out with my friend's streams. He should be streaming tomorrow, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. Super secret project is working as usual. I've just been dealing with dumb shit, so I've been a bit slower than I would have liked, but I think it's good progress. And I'm gonna go take a nap.